Okay, a jump bag is not for jumping. The jump bag was originally designed, and they talk about paratroopers when they'd actually jump out of planes. What are you taking with you? What are the essentials for when you hit the ground in a forensics investigation? So you need a laptop, probably two, data acquisition tools, write blocking, Faraday storage bags, and remote chargers. Spend what your budget will allow. Don't let your equipment be the bottleneck. Remember, you're on site and there could be an adversary in mind, so you need to protect yourself. And the easiest way to protect yourself is get in, get out, right? So let's talk laptops as fast as you can afford. I strongly encourage something like the MacBook Pro, the recent MacBook Pros that are out there with the quad-core technology and 16 gigs of RAM and solid-state drives. Now, if you're not going to do a Mac, lots of RAM, lots of processing power, and solid-state drives. It's the fastest, it's the easiest, it's the efficient, it's the best way to go. Don't skimp on that. Also, create protective material. They make a special laptop case from Pelican cases that is designed for most of the laptops that are out there. Protect that as your gold at that point, along with those hard drives that you're bringing in as your drives that you're imaging too. I think DVD burners are reasonable. I think media card readers should be an external connector to this. I think the reason why I choose a MacBook Pro over any others is because you can actually connect up your Thunderbolt connectors, and soon there's going to be Thunderbolt 2 out there, which will actually connect up to external RAID storage so that you're definitely not the bottleneck there. I think carrying a Drobo case with you, a Drobo N and a Mac laptop, I think those two things get you the ultimate speed that you can possibly deal with at that location, and you can protect those things. Software for forensic specialists in the field, usually this is just recovery software, imaging software, and RAM capturing software. Those are the kinds of things that you really focus your attention on. You don't want to get into the investigation in the field. You want this system that you've set up here to be as bulletproof, as fast, and as efficient as possible for the task at hand, which is acquisition of imaging. That's its main job, so focus in on that. You need the data acquisition tools that go along with this. You may be disassembling a laptop, pulling that hard drive out of that. Speaking of laptops, and going back to the Mac for a second, remember in the newer versions of the laptops, the actual hard drives are actually glued in place, and they're not supposed to be disassembled on site. They're only supposed to be disassembled by qualified Apple technicians. So if you expect to run into any kind of Mac laptops out there, I would seriously consider going to Apple repair school and learning about how to disassemble these things. SIM card readers, I think, are a reasonable tool because you want to be able to open up that phone, pull out that battery, and if it's turned off and powered off, you want to be able to pull this SIM, drop that SIM into your SIM card reader, pull that data back off of it. You may have to be able to reassemble this and turn this back over to the person who you got it from. And you need to be able to do it that fast to pull that data off of it. If you're in the field, there are whole assemblies for all the different connectors that are on all the different phones that are out there. So when you see this phone and you say, okay, well, how do I actually get into this phone? You need to be able to pull the connector away. You need to have that connector that then connects up to all of your data acquisition tools on that side. And remember, the new Apple iPhones have got a different size connector on the back of it, so you have to have the latest and greatest connectors. Usually the kits that are sold for this, they'll have it set up so that every time a new cable comes out, the manufacturer contacts them and they put it into that resource kit right away. You also need video capturing devices. I would say high-speed 7 megapixel cameras. Write block protection is a big deal. Purchase the most expensive write blocker that you can afford for the purpose. I think that the good write blockers that are out there today also have some sort of MD5 hashing capability that's also built into them. You're talking about tools that can be very, very simple or very complex and have lots and lots of different configurations on them. Let's talk about Faraday cages. Faraday cages basically stop emanations from sending and receiving. If you've got that phone, remember, it's sending and receiving continually from all the towers that are around it, maybe from Bluetooth devices, maybe even from, say, wireless connections out there. So you need to be able to investigate this device. You need to be able to play with this device without those signals going away from or coming to. And that's what we have here. We have 3 different devices. On the lower left, what we see is a Faraday cage where we put the device inside of it and stick our hands inside of there. Now the difficulty here is that you can't plug the connectors in and then pull the imaging off of these things. It makes it a little tough. You can see what's going on in there, and there's no emanations going away, but it's kind of difficult to manipulate. The one in the upper right-hand corner is just a simple little Faraday bag that you can see through. The problem again with this is that you can't manipulate the device. Now the one in the middle is actually kind of cool, but it takes a little bit of time to set up. This is a Faraday cage, a portable Faraday cage. It is a tent with copper mesh and then a covering for it, for the copper mesh, and a stand that goes over the top. You step inside with all of your tools. You collect your information off of that particular device at that time, and then you put it in a portable Faraday bag and carry it back to your lab after you've pulled the evidence off of it. That's probably your best option if you've got the time to set something like this up. If not, you might have to just shove it into a bag and then go back to your lab and then do your examination. Sometimes you only get a hold of the cell phone for 15 or 20 minutes, and that may be all the time that you have, so you want to collect as much information as possible. You need remote chargers for all the things that you are going to encounter, especially for those mobile devices. You don't want it to be running out of juice and die on you as you're getting it back to the lab. So have a mobile charger for that, for the laptops that you're going to encounter, and for the desktops you're going to need remote power like a UPS to actually disconnect the power from the wall while still feeding power to the device. There's a whole science in actually supplying power for these tools. So what do forensics labs do? Okay, let's talk about just a couple typical procedures and then data destruction that is important. Okay, creating an exact replica of a hard disk or other storage device. Imaging. Identifying leads and computer evidence contained in files and slack space. It's called carving, and also doing searches on the media. Documenting findings and providing expert witness testimony to help clarify technical computer issues during the litigation process. That's you, the forensics investigator, saying this is what I found in a scientific way. Being disassociated from the crime, but being engaged with the evidence that's in front of you. And lastly, finding, documenting, analyzing, and recording data on a formatted and purposely damaged hard drives. In other words, people are going to try and wreck the evidence, and you still have to get at it. Those are some of the standard procedures. The last thing that I want to leave you with is prepare for data destruction by industry standards. The data destruction that we're talking about here is the U.S. Department of Defense 5220-22M. How do you shred afterward? How do you do it appropriately? Now, there are all sorts of devices that are out there that will help you to destroy hard drives so that they cannot be retrieved. You're not destroying evidence. You're destroying copies of evidence that could otherwise fall into the wrong hands and cause problems for the organization. Usually what we're talking about is just wiping. And when we're talking about data destruction, we're talking about overwriting the correct way. The one that I always look at and is easy to look up for you and I is something called Gutman. And Gutman overwrites it a specific number of times over and above the DoD standard. It writes all ones, all zeros, all ones, and I think then at that point it puts random data across the drive so that that data is just basically noise. You can purchase DoD certified hard drives, or you can go to the manufacturer and you can request forensics drives from the manufacturers that are out there suited to your purpose. The difference between a regular drive that you purchase and a forensics drive that you purchase is the concept of refurbishing. For data forensics, there is no refurbishing whatsoever. You must have a drive from the manufacturer that does what you need it to do, which is not have any original evidence on it. Now, after a while, you're going to be using these drives to capture that evidence, and then you want to repurpose it. There are actually utilities within the drive disk duplicator physical hardware cabinets that you can actually wipe those with this DoD 5220-22M that will actually wipe it correctly and then actually print you a receipt for that in some cases. So, when it comes to your lab, you get what you pay for. Spend as much as your budget will allow. I think the first investment is the people themselves, and the second investment is the portable tools. Down the line, I would think that you would make a beautiful evidence room, and you would have a place to process all this, but at least be able to go out there in the field and do data acquisition, because then at least you can turn this over to a forensic lab of your choice.